Okay, my review for this video is Titanic. This is the 1997 film, written, directed, produced by James Cameron, which swept the Oscars. It won 11 Academy Awards that year. Definitely, I mean, one of the most popular movies of its time. In 1997, I mean, at that time, I mean, people wouldn't shut up about this movie, basically. So much so that, like, not even without just cause, I think a lot of people were just sick about hearing about it. And of course, that Celine Dion song, "My Heart Will Go On," you couldn't turn on a radio without hearing that in the late '90s. That and "Living La Vida Loca." Just stop it. But I mean, now that kind of the dust is cleared, so to speak. It has reached its own status in film history as the classic that it is, and a great movie that this is. I personally feel this is a great and powerful epic film, and very emotionally involving, and the romance is really good between Jack and Rose. Obviously, this is a DVD I have here. I really need to get it on Blu-ray, I think. But whatever. I mean, kind of one thing I noticed about watching it again. I watched it again recently. Some of the effects maybe aren't as perfect as maybe I remember them being, so I think to see them in pristine Blu-ray conversion, maybe it wouldn't be quite as good. Or maybe they touched up a bit on it. I don't know. But movie, of course, is James Cameron's epic tale of the doomed voyage of the RMS Titanic in 1912. It's a true story, basically, of you know, the actual sinking of the ship. Of course, the romantic plot of the movie between Jack and Rose, it is a work of fiction, and kind of like I spoke in my previous video about the romance between Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara, and Gone with the Wind, another epic film that swept the Oscars. This one, it is a more kind of conventional love story. Like, it's definitely a story that we've seen in so many ways before. I mean, basically, poor street rat, rich girl, they fall in love, and what brings them together is fate, and how they meet each other on the Titanic, basically, and you know how social convention won't let them be, basically. I mean, it's not the most original love story. But it kind of shows you a sign of the times, like in 1939 with something like Gone with the Wind. How it did have at least the popular novel as its backbone in order to tell the story. So they didn't really need to tweak the story or write an original story based on that work, because it was already written. Titanic, it is written directly for the screen from James Cameron. Curiously enough, he did not receive an Oscar nomination for the screenplay, which, you know, for a movie to win this many Oscars, that's unusual. Definitely kind of maybe even like a slap in the face to Cameron. But I guess, like, with a movie this epic, with so many special effects at work, like, this was, like, crazy. Like, the publicity around this movie, like, you know, we will make you believe that you're witnessing that Titanic sinking. Quite a work. I mean, definitely this is one of the most ambitious films ever made when you think about it. So to set it among the backdrop of this love story, this fictional story, I guess they couldn't quite, you know, tell too much of a unique story. I mean, basically, they need to have something that's kind of audience friendly, I guess. And you know, the fact that they don't tell, you know, real stories about real passengers on this ship, I think was a smarter move, because I mean, how could you pick just one story? Why not make your own story that encapsulates the ship of dreams, and what was possible in this floating luxury liner between a poor boy and a rich girl, and their relationship. It is fairly tried and true with the love story, but it's an example of tried and true done very well, because the basic plot elements, sure, you could pick them apart, no problem at all. But the thing about Jack and Rose, I mean, kind of what works well about them, and why I think audiences responded to it so well, and why they continue to respond to it, because they do feel very much of our time. They feel like, you know, modern people with modern sensibilities. so I think it almost had to be this made up story about, you know, the again, rich girl, trapped in her own life. She has other ambitions, and she's stuck in this womanly role. She's engaged to a jerk, but who's rich and who will continue her family's luxury and their higher class status, basically. But then, so many ways being freed by her love affair with the poor boy, who's a free spirit, who's, you know, doesn't know where he's going to be the next day. He's, you know, always riding on the wind, basically. And his, you know, free spirit, which I think the relationship does really work really well. I mean, it is kind of moving, like how they are able to find each other, and I think it is done in such a way that does feel convincing, because plot elements aside, asshole fiance by Billy Zane aside, their chemistry is undeniable, and not just the two actors, Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet, but the characters' chemistry. Like, I mean, you really do believe that this story could have happened, which I think is important when it does kind of bring their conflict with their love story almost to a halt, where it's no longer about, you know, their love triangle, their almost petty problems, but not really. It is a spiritual problem with Rose, and how she's freed spiritually through relationship with Jack, and how Jack, you know, finds this amazing thing in her. Um, um, no, but you know what I mean. And how he responds to her in such a way that he can see absolutely what's in, like, what's in her spirit, basically, and how in love with what he says, that beautiful speech when he kind of takes her aside, and he's like, that flame is gonna burn out, and come away with me, and it's good, it works well, but all that is put to a halt when the sinking of the Titanic takes place, and then it becomes a story of survival. But since it does have the backbone of that love story, working with the characters, it gives them the appropriate drive to survive, not just this terrible tragedy, but to survive with each other, to you know, continue on, basically, with their lives. So I thought that worked well. You know, again, obviously you can pick apart everything, and the Billy Zane character, the asshole fiance. I mean, he's straight out of like Disney Villain 101. But he's so brilliant in his performance. That's the thing about this movie. Even with the plot elements, it's just done so well, I think. Like, if you're gonna have kind of the tried and true, you may as well, you know, perfect it, which I think James Cameron does. And so many, you know, bare bones of it is not unique, but the details of it are unique. Like, of course, I mean, the beautiful scene where he takes her to the bed, the couch, and draws her with the heart of the ocean, which is kind of like the iconic scene of the movie, and kind of the driving force of the larger plot, with the modern story, because it is framed through modern times, through taking place in 1997, basically, with the expedition to find this jewel, this diamond, this heart of the ocean, with Bill Paxton's character, and how he finds that picture, and that kind of sets up the whole plot of finding Rose and everything like that. And it was funny watching it again this time. I mean, I've seen the movie maybe 10, 15 times or so throughout my life, I guess. I mean, the first time I saw it was in theaters, actually. I was a little young to see it, but, you know, whatever. I mean, it was, I think, rated PG-13 on appeal from the MPA, even though it had, of course, scenes of tragedy and a nudity with Kate Winslet. But I think, you know, nothing like, no excessive bad language, or no brutal kind of blood or anything like that. So I can see why they made that kind of appeal for the movie, because of course it reached a wider audience that way, made a bagillion jajillion dollars or whatever. But kind of the things that I notice, and kind of how I interpret it in my own way, kind of as a viewer. The Bill Paxton character, I mean, he's totally Jim Cameron. He is absolutely the surrogate for James Cameron, which I thought was interesting, like, because this character, who he is somewhat obsessed with Titanic, and you could say the same for James Cameron, because he did everything that the Bill Paxton character's doing, going in the little submarine and taking the camera and looking and kind of just falling in love with this oddly preserved small period of time where everything's in this underground graveyard basically, but so many stories that exist there, and he lifts up this story, and it's quite amazing. And kind of another thing that I felt about the movie is that the thing about the movie is that kind of the ending is sort of open to interpretation, I guess. Like a lot of people say, okay, spoiler alert. Rose, old Rose, played by Gloria Stewart, she's telling the story basically to Bill Paxton and his crew of expedition people or whatever. At the end, we find that she has the heart of the ocean the whole time, and she drops into the ocean. Drops it in the ocean, and then goes to sleep. And some people are like, oh well, she's just dreaming and remembering the Titanic, but other people will say that she dies, which I absolutely believe that at the end of this movie, that's Rose's death. And kind of what I thought about it watching this time, like the moment she picks up the phone, she says, "That's me. I'll be goddamn, that's me." She has every intention of dying, but what she wants to do is, find her way back to there, kind of where her heart belongs. A woman's heart is a deep ocean of secrets, basically. And so it was her kind of way, and I think it's very beautiful in kind of thinking about it. Like, it was her way of being as close to where her heart figuratively is the whole time, and remembering the story, remembering her love with Jack, and, living through it one last time. And then, as Jack even says, like when the ship sinks, he's like, "You're going to grow old, you're going to have lots of babies, you're going to sleep comfortably in your bed." And, shit. That's what happens at the end of... That's what happens at the end of this movie. But yeah, anyway, I think it's kind of beautiful. And kind of like, I like that it is somewhat hopeful in that way. Like, you don't see many movies that kind of suggest like the afterlife, basically, and that's what it kind of does. And again, that's where Rose's heart has belonged this whole time. She's lived the whole life, and you see like the little pictures and everything like that, and she relives the story one more time. She lets the world know her story, basically, and she's ready to die, and that's where her heart belongs. And Jack is waiting for her. He takes his hand out, like, "Come with me," and everyone's clapping, and it's a beautiful movie. I mean, it really is. I can't really, knock the movie just for being popular, and that's what a lot of people do. And you shouldn't really hold a movie in ill will just because it is so insanely popular, which this movie was. I mean, definitely, if we're talking, this is 1997, whatever, stop talking about Titanic. I don't want to hear it. Blah blah blah. Whatever. I mean, that's fine. I can understand that. But since time has passed, and it's earned its place, and it's earned all the Academy Awards that it won. So definitely, it's aged very well. It's hard to believe. It's insane to believe that this movie is almost 20 years old. In 3 more years, we're going to be celebrating the 20th anniversary of Titanic, which is just nuts to me. But I mean, definitely it was, James Cameron's, biggest, most ambitious movie. I mean, with Avatar, I mean, we kind of always had this impression of James Cameron as like this Oscar darling director. But the movies that he did before this, I mean, well, think about it, like True Lies he did before this, and Aliens, Terminator. So, I mean, definitely you wouldn't expect like a romantic drama, even though his movies, like what James Cameron has said of his own movies, all of his movies are love stories in one way or another. Terminator definitely was. Aliens was of paternal love, as was Terminator 2. And True Lies, it was, like a romantic comedy, basically. But because James Cameron can so effectively write good characters and a good love story, but also have such expertise in the special effects department. That's where this movie takes a higher level and becoming the huge epic, the epic that it is. Because really, even though I can say I've seen some special effects in this movie that don't look quite like, don't look perfect anymore, though they may have been quite impressive at the time. They've kind of aged a little bit, like you can tell, oh, this is kind of a CG thing or whatever. But you really feel it. Like, once, they establish that, hey, you're looking at this real ship. Hey, this is how it's felt like at the time, what the day-to-day was of this ship at the time. When it finally sinks and kind of the whole backstory of how it was made and what the issues were and why this tragedy happened and how easily it could have been avoided. James Cameron brings his expertise in the actual, kind of schematic ways about it, like the facts of Titanic, but also the special effects and how, specifically in kind of that early scene when one of the guys, he like shows that little like kind of like video blueprint of what happened. Like, okay, here's the ship, then it hit the thing, and then it sunk, and then it's broken in half. So with that in our mind, it kind of works like in the back of our head while we're actually watching it happen. Because as even Rose, the older Rose, Gloria Stewart, says, yeah, it wasn't quite like that. Thank you for that, though. So you experience the actual terror of it. And kind of because in that point of the movie, as I mentioned, it kind of sidesteps just the Rose and Jack story. It shows a larger scale of things, like the horrible tragedy and how it happens. But like, the captain kind of sensing that maybe we shouldn't be doing this. It'll be fine. I'll go. Then they hit the iceberg, and then the horrible tragedy that occurs, and everyone trying to get to the lifeboats, and the classes being segregated, and the rich are getting on the lifeboats, and how there's not enough lifeboats, and it's a horrible situation. So you really feel a part of that, and there's some very very just heartbreaking scenes. Like, of course, the one infamously, horribly tear-jerking, unrelenting part of the movie, unmerciless part of the movie, where the waterworks really get going, is with the band. And the band is that, like the classical band. They're like, okay, well, everybody's getting on the lifeboats. Okay, play something cheery, blah blah blah, and they do that. Then things are getting more and more dire, and they all like, okay, let's go on our separate ways or whatever. And then they're like, well, what are we going to do? Let's keep playing. And then that beautiful music, and it kind of shows what's happening as they're playing, as things are getting worse and worse. And, the husband and wife together as the water's coming in, and the mother and their daughter. Shit. Fuck this movie. And yeah, just all that horrible stuff. And Vincenzo, my favorite character, Vincenzo, he gets smashed by the stack, which sucks. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely shows the tragedy in an effective way, and the struggle with Rose and Jack to survive, and how they want to live on, and they want to be together. But this was a one-way trip for Jack, unfortunately. But of course, he lives in her heart forever, and kind of, I think, the reason why, when they show at the end, Billy Zane, he gave her the coat, and the coat, of course, had the heart of the ocean in it. She finds it. I think that's kind of her way of keeping it all her life. And she even mentions, and it's a very, again, a tear-jerking kind of line, where she says, he saved me in every possible way that you could save a person. I don't even have a picture of him, but she had the heart of the ocean with her the whole time, so that's kind of her keepsake. So yeah, I mean, it's shit. But the movie, I think, despite some holes that you could put in the plot, I think it's a great epic. I mean, it's definitely emotionally involved. Even think about tearing up a little bit thinking about some of the scenes. So that's a sign of a great effective film, I think, in my opinion. But just it is so convincingly acted and executed, directed. A great supporting cast aside from Leo and Kate, who of course they became icons in their own way. Like everybody knows the romance of Jack and Rose. I mean, it is basically, you can equate it to um, Rhett and Scarlet, except their love story is more conflicted through just fate of this horrible event. But the supporting cast, I mean, Kathy Bates is in the movie. She's great. The unsinkable Molly Brown, which is actually a real person. Billy Zane, of course, who's again he's kind of the stereotypical kind of villainous character, but he's great in the movie, and everybody else. So I won't list like the entire cast, but you know they do an A+ job. But yeah, James Cameron, he really took an ambitious project in this film, and really delivered on the expectations. And I do think it's an absolute classic. It definitely has its place in film history. Again, I need to get the Blu-ray, but this DVD set is pretty nifty. I mean, you can see that like it has a lot of special features. You see James Cameron with them and stuff, and there's a lot of good supplements. There's a commentary track with James Cameron basically patting himself on the back, which whatever. I mean, and I know the movie got kind of again, aside from just the popularity of it and people being sick of hearing about it, some people kind of criticized James Cameron when he won the Best Director Oscar, saying, "I'm the king of the world, yay!" But I mean, he was being cute. He wasn't really meaning it. And it was like a moment of silence for everyone on Titanic. A little much, James. But hey, he earned it with this spectacular motion picture. Kind of like an example of within that time frame, I mean, even something of today, how special effects can be used to serve the story, because you couldn't convincingly tell this particular story of the sinking of the Titanic in such explicit detail and in such realistic kind of details that you could without these incredible special effects. So, I mean, I know a lot of people, and I'll say it myself, like, I'm sick of seeing CGI this, CGI that, whatever. But I mean, this is definitely an example of how incredible set design and costume design as well can kind of serve as long as like they work together. Because there are moments in this movie. It's not like like Star Wars prequels where you see like they're just all on a blue screen all the time. No, I mean there's actual physical sets in the movie, of course. But for some of the more elaborate parts, of course, it does have to be special effects. So yeah, I mean, 11 Oscars, that's saying a lot about this movie. Time has passed. I think its story stands, and it stands the test of time. And I can't believe it. In 3 years, we're going to be celebrating the 20th anniversary of Titanic, but I'm sure we're going to be celebrating the 40th. We're going to be celebrating the 50th and 100th, maybe if I'm still alive. Whoa. But yeah, a great movie. I love it. If you don't like it, I mean, okay, whatever, you're entitled to, but I think it's an absolute classic. A great film, great epic from James Cameron, great acting from Jack and Rose, Leo and Kate, the love story of our time. I think it's a great movie, and a great movie to watch on Valentine's Day if you want to cry your fucking eyes out, which you probably will, unless you don't have a heart. But that's my review. Thank you very much for watching, and more to come.